Hi, I'm Craig Moody. The story you are about to hear is raw and often brutal. So is love. Welcome to the Prince of New York.
Introduction. There ain't much to be said for a guy like me, a self-described wise guy from the Bronx, born in the city on August 5th, 1952. My mom and pops did me right. They made sure I got an education. They made sure I knew God and the saints and all of that. They made sure to teach me the value of the dollar and to respect the Mother Mary and the nuns and priests and all. They also told me to be wise of the cops and never to give full trust in the government. Pops was born in Salerno, Mom in Palermo. They migrated to New York just 2 years before I was born. I have three sisters and a younger brother, but my brother didn't make it past the age of 6. Pop drove a bus for the city, and Mom worked as a maid at some fancy hotel in Manhattan. The story I am about to tell you ain't something that you are used to hearing. This ain't another Goodfellas or The Godfather. Fuck, this ain't even another A Bronx Tale. My story is different. Real different. It comes from the same vein as those stories, but mine has something a bit fringe and I suppose taboo. Now, I don't want you to invest yourself too far into this just to scare yourself off by something you might not be too familiar with or are ignorantly afraid of. But my story revolves around my love affair with someone who was at one time simply known as the Prince of New York. Yeah, I get it. Most of the people I know and grew up with would never approve of me sharing a story of what they consider that fag shit. But what I got to tell is something real, something honest. And best of all, for you mafia junkies out there, something brutal, full of murder and carnage and intimate details about one of the most famous of the most infamous five mob families. Now, obviously, I can't go using real names and telling you which family, which Don, or which prince I am referring to. Maybe you're wise enough to figure it out. Maybe you ain't. It really don't matter. What matters is this. This is my life story. It's my past. It's something I endured and a life I am not ashamed of. Sure, my life now ain't nothing like it was then. I am reformed, I guess you could say. The 1980s changed all that. Giuliani and the RICO cases. The families ain't what they used to be, so maybe I can get away with a bit of the truth now. More so than I would have back then. But I live a different life now. I have a new name, a new address, a new set of friends, everything. I don't know my sisters no more. None of the nieces and nephews even know I exist. But it all had to be that way. It had to be the choice I made if I wanted to live. And here I am, still alive, still here, now sharing my story with you, still out running some businesses and enjoying some of the pleasures life has to offer. Of course, I'm all legit now, but that don't change the fact that I know how to scheme and care for my own. It just comes naturally to me. I can make things happen when I need to. It's a part of who I am, and it will never change. That life still runs through my veins. Those years and experiences made up how I think, how I feel, heal, and even how I love. Anyway, yeah, this book might be full of some fag shit, but hopefully, by the time you're done reading this, if you give it a chance and stick it out till the end, you will see that my story ain't all that different than that of so many who have survived this kind of life. Maybe you'll see that my story is more like yours than you may be willing to admit. So, if you're brave enough to hang in there with me, I promise to be as honest as I can, without using real names, without giving too much detail to certain incriminating activities, and without saying anything that could ever be traced back to me or some of those who are still out there on the streets. This is for my sake and theirs, perhaps even yours. Thank you for taking the time to read this far. If I see you at the end of this thing, I'll appreciate it. Chapter 1. The Prince of New York. So, all this begins in 1973. I wasn't yet 21, but I was doing pretty well for myself regardless. I had an apartment in Brooklyn. I was banging this broad named Kathy. Again, real names not needed. She worked as a waitress, and I was running papers for one of the local families. Take that to mean what you want, but it paid well. I got mixed up working for the mob when I was about 15 or so. My father knew what was going on, but my mother never did, not even when she passed away in '75. She died of cancer, but I think the very idea of her son working for the Mafia would have put her into the grave just the same. Pop never said too much about it. I know he didn't approve, but he kept much of his opinion to himself. He didn't have no family business to leave me or even a trade he wanted me to follow along in. He drove a fucking bus. What could he say? I was pulling in more green than him when I was just 17, so he knew he didn't have much of a leg to stand on. Told you the story ain't like a Bronx tale. Sure, my dad drove a bus like the dad in that movie, but the similarities end there. My dad was afraid of what I was doing. He was afraid of me. He wasn't going to boss up and go stand up to anyone I worked for. He made it known that he wasn't too thrilled, but he kept it to himself. Mostly. He would mutter a few things after having one too many scotches at Christmas, or say sly things here and there to my sisters in front of me. But overall, Pops knew better. He knew that at age 18, I was bigger and stronger than he was, and he knew that I would fatten his lip as fast as I would any other slick talker out on the street. Now, that ain't to say I didn't respect my father. I did, to the core, in fact. But I chose a different way of life than he did. I chose what I considered to be a faster and smarter way to make money. That fucking bus driver job basically killed my father. He passed away just 4 years after my mom. The doctors said it was his cholesterol and blood pressure that killed him, but I know better. Driving around a bunch of loser hoodlums, filthy street shits, and degenerates killed him. The shame of it all. He watched as people used and schmoozed his country out of everything. He and my mother came here and worked their asses off, to the bone, blood, guts, and all, just to feed their family. They did it the hard, honest way, while he watched as so many abused the social systems put in place, allowing people to sit around all day sniffing paint, making more babies, and living off the money he made for the government. I saw it too, which is one of the many reasons why I chose not to contribute to such a fucked up way of living. The money I made went to me and whoever I chose to support or share it with. I don't have no fuckhead bureaucrats deciding some crackhead in Philly is deserving of my hard-earned tax dollars, feeding her cracked habit or one of the many dirty-faced little bastard kids she has running around. I know that sounds harsh, and I apologize, but you have to understand the way I was brought up and the way I see the world because of it. I watched my father grind his life away for this city, this country. And for what? Just so he could live out the last of his sad, sick years on a pension that barely covered his rent, much less his mounting medical bills. If it wasn't for me and my sisters helping him, both with the day-to-day tasks of living and his finances, which was funded mostly by just me, the poor man may have died in some community center bed, or worse yet, the street itself, with nothing to show for his life of service to America than a rotting set of bones in an old Italian neighborhood graveyard. But I digress. It's the early 70s, and I am living large. Well, for what I thought was large at that time. Kathy was a good girl. She came from good people. She was the kind of chick I was supposed to be with. It started out as just fucking. I knocked her up at least twice, but she lost both. Probably for the best, but at the time it was pretty devastating, especially for Kathy. We weren't married at the time, a fact that her parents were not too keen about. I did plan on marrying her, and I probably would have had I not met. Guess I'm just going to refer to him as the Prince for this. Prince for short. I can't say his name to you. I wouldn't. It ain't right, but I will tell you his story. Meeting Prince changed the game for me. He was the son of the dawn of a different family than the one I worked for. I met him on one of my many routine daily runs. He was seated near the doorway of the deli I was dropping at. We met eyes, almost like in one of those old black and white movies from the 30s and 40s, the kind my mother used to watch on Saturday nights on our second-hand television set, which had a crack running through the middle of the screen. I was so happy when I was able to buy my mother a new set just a year or so before her death. She was so proud of it. In fact, it's probably one of the simplest yet purest things I was ever able to do for someone I love. Anyway, I meet eyes with this guy. He is naturally built and broad and very Italian. Dark hair, dark eyes, a face that could rival one of those marble statues in Rome. He was beautiful, and everyone knew it, including him. Women, men, fuck, even the fucking dogs were attracted to this guy. I looked away, as did he. I made my drop, took the envelope of money, and made my way out the door and to my waiting car, which was still running. I always kept the car running whenever I made drops and pickups. You never knew when you needed to just get the fuck out of somewhere. As I was dropping into the driver's seat, this guy, Prince, walks out. He lights a cigarette and walks toward the passenger side of my car. The window was down. He moves to the window, takes a massive drag from the cigarette, then leans down to peer into the car. At the time, I had a brand new Plymouth Roadrunner. Looking back, that car was a piece of shit, but at that time, I thought it was the coolest thing on the street. "What family you with?" Prince asked me. His voice was deep and powerful. He didn't make it that way. He didn't try to sound more like a man or any of that kind of shit. It was just naturally low and booming. I remember the feeling it gave me the first time I heard it. Felt all sorts of tingling and whatnot all over my body. It actually stunned me a bit. I remember shaking my head to clear my focus. I answered his question and he nodded. He took another drag from the cigarette before flicking it off toward the gutter. "You ever go to Christopher Street?" he asked. I knew right away what he meant. Christopher Street was where the fags went to socialize and often hook up. The question made my stomach turn, even though I had driven through that area more than once, just out of curiosity. I'd never done anything at that point, as far as when it came to being with guys. I'd certainly fucked my way through a herd of females, but my only claim to homosexuality at that time was when me and my cousin, we'll call him Charlie, were just 13 and we found some nudie magazine under his dad's bed. We both jerked off to it. We did this repeatedly over the course of a weekend. By Sunday night, we were jerking each other, but I don't remember it being very sexual. It was more communal, you could say. Charlie's eyes were glued to the chicks in the magazine. Mine bounced from the girls to my cousin's fat Italian dick. Even though we were the same age, he was already far more developed than I was. I recall being fascinated by the size of his member and the full, thick, dark plush of hair that surrounded it. I spent many a night jerking off to the visual image I kept of my cousin's dick and the memory of the feeling of it in my grip. I would remember how he busted a nut all over his chest and down my fingers. He offered me a sock to wipe it with. I did so, but not before sneaking a sniff of the stuff. He obliged me with the same service. He jerked me till I came. But I don't remember him being all that enthusiastic about it, especially after he had already had an orgasm. I know this all might sound a bit freaky, but it's normal kid stuff. A ton of men experience mutual masturbation around those early puberty years, when everything is first blooming and surging. It ain't gay, it's just curiosity and blossoming sexuality. But for me, there was something more to it. I was far more mesmerized by my cousin's manhood than he was with mine. I didn't want to fuck my cousin or nothing sick like that. I don't want you thinking I'm some sort of incestual pervert. I was just fascinated with his tool, its size, the mechanics of it, the hair, all of it. It was purely the body part itself, not who it was attached to in his relation to me. But that was it. That was the only other penis besides my own I had ever touched until I met Prince. And even then, it was some time before I saw or touched his and he mine. But we'll get to all that. I shook my head, signaling that I had never been to Christopher Street. He nodded and sort of smirked. I guess I was so blown away by his beauty that I had forgotten to be offended by his question. Most guys would have jumped out of the car and beat the shit out of someone for even hinting that they might be a fag. But I didn't. I simply answered the guy and went about my business. But the seed was sown. Found myself thinking about him all the time. When Kathy would work late and I could lay around and beat my meat, I found myself thinking about Prince, his big body and handsome face. I didn't envision us fucking or nothing. I just sort of thought of him, his presence, the essence of him, his features and masculinity. I can't really explain it, but it was all pretty innocent at first. The next time I saw him was at Sal's, the Italian joint the family I worked for frequented. It was the Don's birthday, my Don, and several of the other family bosses attended out of respect. Prince came with his father. That's when I learned he was the son of a Don. I was happy then that I hadn't reacted poorly to his question about me visiting Christopher Street. No matter the offense, it was never a good thing to beat the shit out of any Don's kid. That was a surefire way to get a bullet lodged in your skull. Prince pretty much ignored me for the entire night. We barely met eyes. I kind of figured he had forgotten who I was or whatever, until my captain sent me out back to arrange something with one of the soldiers. By this time, I was well on my way to becoming a soldier. I believe this second encounter with Prince happened about a month or so before my formal initiation. Anyway, I'm pretty sure I was still a delivery boy around this time, but I was just about to move up if I hadn't done so already. Once we get to the bit about some of my drug habits, you'll understand why my memory, mostly when it comes to the sequence of events, is pretty hazy. Nevertheless, I was out back. Sal was in the kitchen, running the show. Having the heads of several families in his restaurant was always a massive honor for the first-generation Italian immigrant. To him, and to many other Italian immigrant men of his generation, the Dons were practically gods walking around among mere mortals. I remember making whatever transaction and moving back through the kitchen toward the dining room. I stopped to take a leak in the John. I was halfway through when someone entered the small bathroom and moved behind me. I turned to protest, or at the very least let the fucker know that the John was occupied, when a pair of very strong hands gripped over my shoulders. I nearly lost control of my pissing dick when this happened. I started to say something, but then the handsome face of Prince moved into my line of vision. He peered over my shoulder and down at my dick. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say, much less do. I finished the leak and just let everything hang there. He smirked and nodded before moving out of the bathroom. It was then I knew for sure that the guy was a fag, something that would have been absolutely forbidden and shameful for any son of a mob family member, much less the Don himself. I remember standing there for several seconds, just trying to understand what had just happened. Put my cock away, washed my hands, and then returned to the dining room. Once there, Prince ignored me again for the rest of the night. It was when I was leaving, an hour or so after all the Dons had left and most of the party overall, when I spotted Prince lingering on the street corner. I drove up to him and waited. He moved right toward the car, opened the passenger side door, and planted himself on top of the leather seat. He nodded at me. I nodded back. I was frustrated by that point. I had had a few drinks during the dinner, so I was feeling brave. "What makes you think I'm a fucking fruit?" I remember asking, something along those lines. I may have said fairy or fag, I don't know, it doesn't matter. What matters is the guy didn't hesitate for a second. Right there at the stop sign of a relatively busy Italian immigrant neighborhood, he stuck his tongue down my throat and wouldn't let me go. I know I resisted, at least at first. To this day, I can still remember that first kiss with vivid detail. It was like nothing I had ever experienced before. It wasn't like kissing Kathy or any of the broads I had made out with while in high school and whatnot. This kiss was strong and passionate. I remember my heart thudding so loudly that I seriously thought I was going to have a heart attack right then and there. I remember my dick getting hard, something he noticed because he slipped and gripped his hand down over it. But what I remember most of all was the taste of him, the sweet lingering liquor and one of the peppermint mints Sal kept in a bowl near the door of his restaurant. In fact, I can still sense the bit of mint as it transferred from his mouth to mine. Unless he had already swallowed it, the peace melted between us as we continued to kiss. It lasted perhaps 30 seconds or even less, but it felt like a lifetime for me. A sweet, passion-filled lifetime the likes I had never once even fantasized about. He slipped me a small piece of paper, which I later discovered had his name and telephone number scrawled on it, before he popped open the car door and disappeared down the sidewalk. I sat frozen for probably a full minute or more until a car rolled up behind me and blasted its horn. I drove home and went straight to the shower. I could hear Kathy in the kitchen gabbing on the phone to one of her sisters. I drained my dick dry in the shower, coming twice to the thought of this guy's tongue against mine and his strong grip over my concealed erection. Kathy wanted me to fuck her later that night. I tried, but I was spent. I chalked it up to the drinks I had had earlier that evening. She was annoyed, but she let me sleep in peace. I think she probably took care of business on her own with one of the several dildos she kept stashed in her nightstand, or maybe even just her fingers. I didn't care. I drifted off to sleep with the sweet taste of Prince's mouth on mine. That was the very beginning of what would turn out to be the greatest love affair of my life.